So welcome to this reading of part one of Joseph Campbell's Primitive Mythology, part of the Masks of God series. I'm going to start with the psychology of myth today, and we'll read probably about half of the introduction to this section. It's called The Lesson of the Mask. The artist eye, as Thomas Mann has said, has a mythical slant upon life. Therefore, the mythological realm, the world of the gods and demons, the carnival of their masks, and the curious game of as if, in which the festival of the lived myth abrogates all the laws of time, letting the dead swim back to life, and the once upon a time become the very present, we must approach and first regard with the artist's eye. For, indeed, in the primitive world, where most of the clues to the origin of mythology must be sought, the gods and demons are not conceived in the way of hard and fast positive realities. A god can be simultaneously in two or more places, like a melody or like the form of a traditional mask. And wherever he comes, the impact of his presence is the same. It is not reduced through multiplication. Moreover, the mask in a primitive festival is revered and experienced as a veritable apparition of the mythical being that it represents. Even though everyone knows that a man made the mask and that a man is wearing it. The one wearing it, furthermore, is identified with the god during the time of the ritual of which the mask is a part. He does not merely represent the god, he is the god. The literal fact that the apparition is composed of A, a mask, B, its reference to a mythical being, and C, a man, is dismissed from the mind, and the presentation is allowed to work without correction upon the sentiments of both the beholder and the actor. In other words, there has been a shift of view from the logic of the normal secular sphere, where things are understood to be distinct from one another, to a theatrical or play sphere, where they are accepted for what they are experienced as being, and the logic is that of make-believe, as if. We all know the convention, surely. It is a primary spontaneous device of childhood, a magical device by which the world can be transformed from banality to magic in a trice. And its inevitability in childhood is one of those universal characteristics of man that unite us in one family. It is a primary datum, consequently, of the science of myth, which is concerned precisely with the phenomenon of self-induced belief. A professor, wrote Leo Frobenius, in a celebrated paper on the force of the demonic world of childhood, is writing at his desk, and his 4-year-old little daughter is running about the room. She has nothing to do and is disturbing him. So he gives her 3 burnt matches, saying, "Here, play." And sitting on the rug, she begins to play with the matches. Hansel, Gretel, and the witch. A considerable time elapses, during which the professor concentrates upon his task, undisturbed. But then suddenly the child shrieks in terror. The father jumps. What is it? What has happened? The little girl comes running to him, showing every sign of great fright. "Daddy, Daddy," she cries, "take the witch away. I can't touch the witch anymore." An eruption of emotion, Frobenius observes, is characteristic of the spontaneous shift of an idea from the level of the sentiments, Gemüt, to that of sensual consciousness, sinnliches Bewusstsein. Furthermore, the appearance of such an eruption obviously means that a certain spiritual process has reached a conclusion. The match is not a witch. Nor was it a witch for the child at the beginning of the game. The process, therefore, rests on the fact that the match has become a witch on the level of the sentiments, and the conclusion of the process coincides with the transfer of this idea to the plane of consciousness. The observation of the process escapes the test of conscious thought, since it enters consciousness only after or at the moment of completion. However, inasmuch as the idea is, it must have become. The process is creative in the highest sense of the word, for, as we have seen, in a little girl a match can become a witch. Briefly stated, then, the phrase of becoming takes place on the level of the sentiments, while that of being is on the conscious plane. This vivid, convincing example of a child's seizure by a witch while in the act of play may be taken to represent an intense degree of the demonic mythological experience. However, the attitude of mind represented by the game itself, before the seizure supervened, also belongs within the sphere of our subject. For, as J. Huizinga has pointed out in his brilliant study of the play element in culture, the whole point at the beginning is the fun of play, not the rapture of seizure. In all the wild imaginings of mythology, a fanciful spirit is playing, he writes, on the borderline between jest and earnest. As far as I know, ethnologists and anthropologists concur in the opinion that the mental attitude in which the great religious feasts of savages are celebrated and witnessed is not one of complete illusion. There is an underlying consciousness of things not being real. And he quotes, among others, R. Merritt, who in his chapter on primitive credulity in The Threshold of Religion develops the idea that a certain element of make-believe is operative in all primitive religions. The savage, wrote Merritt, is a good actor who can be quite absorbed in his role, like a child at play, and also, like a child, a good spectator, who can be frightened to death by the roaring of something he knows perfectly well to be no real lion. By considering the whole sphere of so-called primitive culture as a play sphere, Huizinga then suggests in conclusion, we pave the way to a more direct and more general understanding of its peculiarities than any meticulous psychological or sociological analysis would allow. And I would concur wholeheartedly with this judgment, only adding that we should extend the consideration to the entire field of our present subject. In the Roman Catholic Mass, for example, when the priest quoting the words of Christ at the Last Supper pronounces the formula of consecration with utmost solemnity, first over the wafer of the host, hoc est enim corpus meum, for this is my body, then over the chalice of the wine, hic est enim calix sanguinis mea novi et aeterni testamenti mysterium fidei qui pro vobis et pro multis effunditur in remissionem peccatorum. For this is the chalice of my blood of the new and eternal testament, the mystery of faith, which shall be shed for you and for many unto the remission of sins. It is supposed that the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ, that every fragment of the host and every drop of the wine is the actual living Savior of the world. The sacrament, that is to say, is not conceived to be a reference, a mere sign or symbol to arouse us in a train of thought, but is God himself, the Creator, Judge, and Savior of the universe, here come to work upon us directly, to free our souls, created in his image, from the effects of the fall of Adam, and Eve in the Garden of Eden, which we are to suppose existed as a geographical fact. Comparably, in India, it is believed that in response to consecrating formulae, deities will descend graciously to infuse their divine substance into the temple images, which are then called their throne or seat, pitha. It is also possible, and in some Indian sects even expected, that the individual himself should become a seat of deity. In the Gandharva Tantra, it is written, for example, no one who is not himself divine can successfully worship a divinity. And again, having become the divinity, one should offer its sacrifice. Furthermore, it is even possible for a really gifted player to discover that everything, absolutely everything, has become the body of a god, or reveals the omnipresence of God as the ground of all being. There is a passage, for example, among the conversations of the 19th century Bengalese spiritual master Ramakrishna, in which he described such an experience. One day he is said to have reported, "It was suddenly revealed to me that everything is pure spirit. The utensils of worship, the altar, the door frame, all pure spirit. Men, animals, and other living things, all pure spirit. Then like a madman I began to shower flowers in all directions. Whatever I saw, I worshipped." Belief, or at least a game of belief, is the first step toward such a divine seizure. The chronicles of the saints abound in accounts of their long ordeals of difficult practice, which preceded their moments of being carried away. And we have also the more spontaneous religious games and exercises of the folk, the amateurs, to illustrate for us the principle involved. The spirit of the festival, the holiday, the holy day of the religious ceremonial requires that the normal attitude toward the cares of the world should have been temporarily set aside in favor of a particular mood of dressing up. The world is hung with banners. Or in the permanent religious sanctuaries, the temples and cathedrals, where an atmosphere of holiness hangs permanently in the air, the logic of cold, hard fact must not be allowed to intrude and spoil the spell. The genteel, the spoil sport, the positivist, who cannot or will not play, must be kept aloof. Hence the guardian figures that stand at either side of the entrances to the holy places. Lions, bulls, or fearsome warriors with uplifted weapons. They are there to keep out the spoil sports. The advocates of Aristotelian logic, for whom A can never be B, for whom the actor is never to be lost in the part, for whom the mask, the image, the consecrated host, tree, or animal cannot become God, but only a reference. Such heavy thinkers are to remain without. For the whole purpose of entering a sanctuary or participating in a festival is that one should be overtaken by the state known in India as the other mind. Sanskrit, anya manas, absent-mindedness, possession by a spirit, where one is beside oneself, spellbound, set apart from one's logic of self-possession, and overpowered by the force of a logic of indissociation, wherein A is B and C is also B. So we'll stop there for now. Thank you again for joining me in reading primitive mythology, and we'll have the next session tomorrow. Bye-bye.